Hello, a very warm welcome to Middle East Matters. I'm Sanam Shantyaei. Coming up on this week's show, Bahraini footballer Hakeem Al-Araibi pleads, "Don't send me to Bahrain," in fear of being tortured. A 25-year-old refugee who was detained on his honeymoon in Thailand faces extradition. What happens to Syria's young jihadists? Well, some are being sent to deradicalisation centres in the north of the country. This in a bid to reintegrate the children of the extremists into society. Also coming up, another episode of Flavours of Iraq, an animation series by Iraqi-French filmmaker Fourat Alani. This week, the main character asks his father why they had to leave their home country. Thank you for watching Middle East Matters. We start this week's show with a look at the ordeal of Hakeem Al-Araibi, a Bahraini-born refugee who lives and plays semi-professional football in Australia. Back at home, he was arrested and tortured for speaking out against the government. Today, the 25-year-old is in a Thai prison after refusing voluntary extradition to Bahrain, where he fears he'll be tortured for his political beliefs.
As police led the young footballer away with his legs bound, Hakeem Al-Araibi made a desperate plea to the waiting cameras.
Please save me, please.
A few minutes earlier, the man who once played for Bahrain had launched a formal challenge against extradition to the Gulf Kingdom. He first came to Thailand in November to spend his honeymoon. Instead, he was arrested, and he's been unable to leave Bangkok ever since. He'll now stay at least 60 days longer to prepare his defense.
We have to prove to the court that extraditing Hakeem to Bahrain will put his life in danger.
His supporters have called on Thailand to let him return to Australia, where he's held refugee status since he fled back in 2014. He says he was threatened with torture after taking a stand against the Bahraini government. In 2014, Bahrain sentenced him to 10 years in prison in absentia for his alleged role in vandalising a police station. But he's always denied the charges. The tiny emirate has a majority Shia population, but it's ruled by a Sunni minority determined to crush any form of protest since the Arab Spring threatened its grip on power. And it's not just this Shia opposition that Bahrain's rulers are intent on bringing to its knees.
Des défenseurs des droits humains qui n'ont aucune affiliation spécifique religieuse.
Human rights advocates without any religious connections are also targeted, as are moderate Sunnis calling for more transparency or denouncing corruption. It's all-out repression that hinges on the Sunni-Shia divide. But in reality, even the tiniest form of protest is quickly put down.
Justifier sa démarche, alors qu'en réalité, c'est contre toute forme d'opposition.
The International Federation for Human Rights says some 4,000 opponents of the government have been detained. Al-Wifaq, the main opposition party, was banned last year, and its leader, Sheikh Ali Salman, who has been languishing behind bars for years, was sentenced in January to life imprisonment, along with two other leaders of the group for inciting hatred, spying and insulting the interior minister. Nabil Rajab, a key opposition figure, is also in the crosshairs of the authorities. Last year, the human rights militant was sentenced to 5 years behind bars for publishing tweets criticizing the government.
Over to Syria, where the self-declared caliphate of the Islamic State group is shrinking by the day. Now, some of the young individuals linked to the extremist group who've been detained are being sent to a de-radicalisation centre in the north of the country that authorities hope would turn them into non-threatening citizens who could one day rejoin society.
As we drive across northeastern Syria, we head toward a de-radicalisation centre for young combatants who were enlisted by the Islamic State group. Some 80 teenagers are held in the camp, which is under the control of Kurdish troops.
Assad, when you leave this center, what job would you like to do?
I'd like to work at a market.
We have just learned that this young boy comes from Bretigny-sur-Orge, a Paris suburb. Asadullah, just 13 years old, was arrested near the city of Raqqa We weren't allowed to interview him, but we managed to ask him a few questions. His Chechen father took him to Syria, along with his two brothers.
Il est resté à peu près combien de temps, tu crois? 3 ans. C'était long?
Un jour, c'est comme 3 jours.
Ah ouais.
Trop long le jour.
Asadullah says he did not fight with the IS group. It's impossible to know if he's telling the truth.
J'étais dans la maison, il a bombardé notre maison. Moi, rien. Rien. J'ai rien parce que j'ai vu mes 2 frères morts. Et mon père aussi, il était devenu mort avant. Je ne savais pas où aller.
Asadullah is now alone in this de-radicalization camp. His only goal is to find his mother, who stayed in the Paris area.
C'est facile, vous trouvez ma mère?
On ne sait pas où elle est, ta maman.
Moi, sur la carte, je sais.
Toi, sur la carte, tu sais où elle est?
Ça fait environ 4 ou 3 ans que j'ai pas vu.
He told us he lived in this apartment building in Bretigny-sur-Orge and that he attended this elementary school. He was in 3rd grade when he left France. We then found out that his father, a Chechen refugee who arrived in France in 2008, was known to secret services for his contacts with radical Islamists. He divorced from the mother of his 3 children several years ago. It took us a few days to find her. We meet her at our offices to show her our video footage. It's the first time this Russian refugee has heard from her son in 3 years.
I was so worried he was injured, suffering out there somewhere. Can I take a picture?
She's happy to see he's safe, but worried still.
Do they have enough to eat? How is he doing?
In 2015, her ex-husband told her he was taking his 3 sons on vacation to Turkey, but instead took them to Syria. She knew that her 2 eldest sons had died.
Le président Macron?
Il sait qu'on est ici tout le monde.
Il sait que vous êtes ici, tu crois?
Pourquoi il ne prend pas?
Do you think I can go there? What can I do to bring him back?
The matter of these so-called young revenants has put French authorities in a difficult position. And Asadullah's case is even more complex. He grew up in France, but is a Russian citizen. For now, the boy will have to wait. But since our trip to Syria, he can now talk to his mother on the phone.
Now, Egyptian archaeologists have uncovered a tomb containing 50 mummies dating back to the Ptolemaic era. That's 2,000 years ago. The mummies, of which 12 were children, were found in 4 burial sites south of the capital, Cairo. Although their identities remain unknown, experts believe they're a large family with their pets. Over to the 6th episode of Flavours of Iraq, an animation series written by French-Iraqi journalist Fouad Alani. This week, Fouad, who's also the protagonist in the animation, learns why his family had to leave his home country and move to France.
One day, I asked my father why we were living in France rather than in Iraq. As a young man in 1972, he used to work as a guide for the Ministry of Youth in Baghdad. At that time, Saddam Hussein was vice president. In reality, though, he was already running the country. My father befriended a group of French citizens who were there on official business. They belonged to the Communist Workers' Party. Here, just in case. A few months later, my father was taken into custody. He'd been distributing anti-regime pamphlets. He was locked up and tortured in Qasr al-Nihaya, a jail most people never leave alive. Why was he chosen for release? We'll never know. He left prison with about 30 others. The group was forced to take part in one last ritual that they weren't expecting. Saddam wanted to make an impression on the few opposition members he freed. He wanted to demonstrate his leniency. He assured them they could go back to their lives without fear, and that they would even receive compensation for their time spent in jail. And then, he let them go. My father returned to his apartment and made the hardest choice he's ever made: to leave Iraq and move to France. It's there that he met my mother, an Iraqi woman on vacation. And it's there that both my sister and I were born.
Well, that's it for us this week. Don't forget, you can reach out to us on Facebook and Twitter. That's Middle East Matters France 24. Thank you for watching.
From North America to the southern tip of Patagonia, join us for a look at the latest political, economic, cultural and social news from the Americas.
Inside the Americas, presented by Jeannie Godula on France 24 and France24.com.